Just because you see images of dead children, as disgusting, upsetting as it is, does not automatically make a war unjust.
Guys, new moral dilemma. Either starve 2 million people and then pull the lever and then slowly exterminate them, as horrible as that sounds. Or you can stay on the current track, but Israel cannot exist.
All you need to do to activate the racist chip and people on the left is say something negative about Bernie Sanders. That's it. That's it. We didn't need this past year to tell us how much anti-blackness was engaging in leftism discourse. We didn't need this past year to tell us how many people in the name of progress are excited to use slurs against black people. How many people on the left side, and yes, I'm talking about leftists all the way to progressives and moderates, do not actually care about the issues and will indefinitely defend any of their favorites against their behaviors because of the fact that they feel like anybody who says anything contrary should just be grateful that they are included at all. We didn't need this last year to tell us that. Ever since the era of the pussy hats, I could have told you easily that time period told us so much about what we needed to know. The fact that people will hold somebody like Bernie Sanders as the pinnacle of progress, despite the fact the man has been a senator for 30 plus years, but I won't go into that right now. The fact that people will hold Ruth Bader Ginsburg as a feminist icon when she refused to hire black staff. There's so many more people. I could go on and on and on and on about this, but it is consistently present in everything on this side of the work, and it probably will stay present for a very long time until these people learn to recognize that just because you are somebody who cares about people, because you consider yourself being on the morally good side of the political spectrum, doesn't mean that you are morally superior. And it doesn't mean that you're incapable of having biases and engaging in those biases. But anyways, that's for another conversation.
What does 245 calories of food look like, and why does it matter? A serving size of double-stuffed Oreos is 2 cookies at 140 calories. So 3.5 cookies is about 245 calories, which is what Oxfam said is the average amount of food that the people in North Gaza have every day. This pack of peanut butter cookies, 220 calories for all 6. So a whole pack plus a nibble of one more. And that's what the people of North Gaza are living on because of a genocide. An estimated 300,000 people are still living in the north of Gaza, and they are living off of the equivalent of 1 piece of bread and that amount of peanut butter, which is less than 12% of their daily caloric intake that is suggested for them. All because Israel and the US are refusing to let in any amount of aid, in addition to, the indiscriminate bombing of those people. And all of this is being done in your name, with your tax dollars, by a Democratic president and with near unanimous bipartisan support in our House and Senate to send billions of dollars to do more of this. But please, tell me more about how dangerous those kids are that are just camped out at their college.
So there are 3 countries that I've never been to, and I'm also absolutely in no rush to visit. The first country is India. Now, I understand it is a very popular tourist destination with beautiful cities. And my family's from Trinidad. That's low-key cousins. Don't tell them that. But the way that I understand colorism is so deeply entrenched within the fabric of society there, I don't think I'm willing to ever subject myself to that. And beyond colorism, there's also very distinct anti-Black sentiment. Like, they have their own version of the N-word. Like, that word is so vile. When I was going to publish it in this piece I was working on for a news organization, there were people from India who read it and were like, no, please do not publish that. That word is so disgusting. Please don't. The next country is Argentina, one of the whitest countries in South America. I've been reading up on this concept called blanqueamiento, which was basically this systemic effort to eradicate Black people from the population of Argentina. Now, the extent to which the government did this is debated, but the efforts at erasure in general are very real. They also had shady census practices where they just didn't list race, so Black people would then kind of disappear from data. They take a lot of pride in being European, and they also have a lot of Italian influence. The last country is Russia, and honestly, I'm just afraid I'm gonna do the wrong thing and it won't come back. There's also anti-Blackness, don't get me wrong, but then it's like, okay, so maybe they don't serve me in this restaurant, and then I end up breaking rocks in a Russian jail because I said something I wasn't supposed to. And I be saying a lot of things.
Tactical urbanism, or guerrilla urbanism, is an approach to altering public spaces with low-cost, temporary interventions. It's typically meant to improve public space and lead to long-term change. A lot of the times, tactical urbanists are individuals or groups who take it upon themselves to improve public spaces. And much of the time, they do it whether or not their actions are technically legal. A pretty common type is the painting or sidewalk chalking of novel crosswalks where guerrilla urbanism groups feels like needs them. Same thing with pop-up bike lanes. And every now and then, governments or municipalities will actually follow up and make them guerrilla bike lanes or crosswalks permanent. Or sometimes people will deface public signs lowering speed limits and junk. Or they will build and place benches at bus stops where cities have removed or neglected to place one. Or there's even a holiday now called Parking Day where people will temporarily convert public parking spaces into little parks or resting spaces or pop-up restaurants, etc. This one here was in my city, Eugene. Guerrilla gardening is another type that's been growing in popularity. That's where people will plant food plants or flowers where they're technically not legally supposed to. Last year I started seeing people on TikTok like this guy with flower seeds and Parmesan shakers. Their whole deal was riding around on their bike planting flowers all about town, making the environment look a little nicer and sometimes more edibler. And sometimes people will graft fruit-bearing branches on street trees so that there will be some edible fruits around. And if you think about it, guerrilla gardening has been a thing for at least hundreds of years. Like, you could argue that Johnny Appleseed here in the 1800s was a guerrilla gardener, and he wasn't even the first.
Oh my god, this book is so good, and it's really infuriating at the same time. I'm reading an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. Many of you have read this, but it's my first time through it. I would like to read you 2 passages from that. Don't scroll away. You know the drill. Put it 2 times speed. They're really short, I promise. All right, number 1. Despite the primary use of settler militias, George Washington insisted that the new government had to develop a professional army that would enhance U.S. prestige in the eyes of European countries. He also thought that the cost of using mercenaries at 4 times that of regular troops was too high, but whenever regular troops were sent into the Ohio country, the indigenous resistors drove them out. Reluctantly, Washington resigned himself to the necessity of using what were essentially vicious killers to terrorize the region, thereby annexing land that could be sold to settlers. The sale of confiscated land was the primary revenue source for the new government. Is that sounding like any other country that you know of right now? I'll give you a clue. It rhymes with Jizrael. Okay, one more quick one. The U.S. conquest of southern Ohio was formalized in the 1795 Treaty of Greenville, a victory based on vicious, irregular warfare. The nations of the region no longer had the British and the French and the settlers to play against one another, but rather were now faced with the determined imperialist thrust of an independent republic that had to coddle settlers if they were to recruit any into their service. And these 2 passages really struck me, not because, the genocide of the natives is anything new to me, but because it approaches it from a materialistic lens. The United States wasn't trying to get rid of the natives just because they hated them, although they definitely did. It's because they needed the land in order to increase their power and prestige to the rest of the world. The United States is a country founded and perpetuated through genocide, so it really is no wonder that we are funding and supporting another one in Palestine. Anyway, I haven't finished this book yet, but it's really good. Go read it. Love you guys. Mwah.
I was just, reading my DSM-5 out in H, and I couldn't help but notice that you've been diagnosed with having a fat ass. What's this? Oh, and a little bit of autism.
This is a fashion? Yes! If you're new here, hi, hello, and welcome to the world of Decora fashion! Decora is a Japanese street fashion that has existed since the late 1990s. It's all about decorating yourself from head to toe with layers of clothing and accessories because you are Decora-ating yourself! Ta-da! So this book shows street fashion in Japan from 1980 to 2020, and on this page it talks about Decora. Right here it says Decora-chan, and that is what they would call people who wear Decora fashion. You can also see the year. It says 1996 to 1997. It talks about the rise of this Tokyo kawaii fashion, and it's all about excessive decoration, and those that are into Decora are into DIY, handmaking, and remaking things. In this copy of Zipper magazine from 2005, it talks about Sakura! So this spread right here is talking about the fashion trends from like 1994 to 2005. Right here, 1998, you have Dekora-chan. And during that time, it's gotten even more popular. Flashy colors, wire accessories, and leg covers. And from there, it has evolved and evolved and evolved and spread all over the world. You can find communities in places like Chile, France, China, and it's for anyone of any age, size, gender, wherever they live in the world. You are more than welcome to wear this fashion. If you have any questions about this fashion, feel free to leave them down below and I'll be happy to help. Bye bye!
On average, when you set up a new TikTok account in the name of a teenage boy, it takes just 30 minutes before the first piece of extreme misogynistic content will be promoted to that account. We are witnessing a kind of algorithmically facilitated mass radicalization on a scale that we've never seen before. And that can be really scary and overwhelming, particularly for parents and for educators, and especially when we have a generation of non-digital natives who are parenting and educating a generation of digital natives. There's really no such thing as online harm. We think that there is this kind of artificial barrier between the online and the offline world, but increasingly that simply isn't the case. Where we see forms of intimate image abuse, for example, with technological tools used to facilitate them, the offline harms are immense. Very often in school settings, for example, we see online abuse and offline bullying go absolutely hand in hand. But there are so many things that we can do. We can make sure that we are giving children the tools that they need to tackle these challenges when they come across them. A big part of the solution is around tech regulation, but there's also lots that individual parents and educators can do, starting with familiarising themselves with the online landscape that young people come into contact with, and then progressing to safe, non-judgmental conversations with them. The more that we talk to young people about these issues, the more opportunities there are to intervene and to provide them with some of the tools that might help them when they're facing these kinds of challenges.
The country is run by a small group of power-hungry elites. They own the media, they own the government, and they write the laws to serve themselves. Yes. They manipulate markets all over the world, and their greed has crashed the economy countless times. 100%. They traffic women, and sometimes even minors. They do. But worst of all, they actually fund both sides of every war. Yes, you finally get it. Billionaires are ruined. It's the Jews. You mother.
Carla Hayden was the first Black person to be head of the National Library of Congress. Okay. What's that mean? The Library of Congress is America's national library. Carla was hired in 2016 and she thought to herself, let's add some spice up in here. During her time, she created the Of the People initiative. It created internships, funded documentaries, made fellowships, and opened up space for identities of color and the LGBTQ+ community to feel represented in the Library of Congress. However, this month she was fired without warning, with no explanation from the Trump administration in an email. The reason we got publicly was that she was putting inappropriate books in the library in pursuit of DEI. We know what that really means. Carla Hayden's goal was to make the library accessible and reflective of everyone in America. And this isn't the first kind of thing that's happened. More and more books that reflect diverse American stories are being banned, and programs celebrating these communities are being defunded. So it's more important than ever to support those stories, and you can start by getting your local library card. I already did my homework, here's mine. Look, it's a little girl surrounded by Black history figures. Very on brand, I think. And support me! Pre-order my book, Black History is Your History, for more Black history stories.
Whenever somebody asks me for Indigenous punk recommendations, I always recommend this band, as they just have the staple sound of what you would think of when you think of Indigenous punk music. 1876 is based in Portland, Oregon, and they are an intertribal band that consists of Blackfeet, Northern Cheyenne, and Oglala Lakota. A lot of their music and their lyrics center around Indigenous issues and issues that affect Indigenous people, all while incorporating elements of punk rock and the punk rock subculture. Some of my favorites are Braids in the Pit, Whistles at Night, and DGAF. Support Indigenous artists.
Can't keep my hands to myself. I mean, I could, but why would I want to?
Does Israel have the right to exist? No. No, it doesn't. If you've been in the Palestine solidarity space for really any amount of time, you've probably had Zionists ask you if you feel as if their colony has the right to exist, and demand, in fact, that it does. And their goal is pretty simple, right? Either they get you to say yes, and therefore you're in some fashion legitimizing their settler colonial territorial possessions, or you say no, and they smear you as an anti-Semite. But the truth is that it's really worth examining the question, because when Zionists say that so-called Israel has the right to exist, what they're really saying is that so-called Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish majority settler colony. Because that's the reality, right? The Zionist project is not just some nation state that's been created through the consent of those it governs. It is a settler colony that has been violently imposed upon those whose land it is trying to actively steal. Zionist planners have been incredibly open and honest about this, by the way, right? Like even David Ben-Gurion, way back in the day, was very clear that to establish a stable Zionist colony, you needed more favorable demographic outlays on the ground. What does that mean? Well, for David Ben-Gurion, it meant 70% settlers and 30% Palestinians at worst, right? That 30% is like the maximum amount. And for later Zionist planners, that was kind of changed to about 60-40. But the goal still is to have a majority settler population in Palestine. And for Zionist planners looking at that and then realizing that there are a lot more Palestinians than settlers, they have to come to a conclusion of how to maintain that project, right? How to maintain solvency. And the decisions they end up making are ethnic cleansing campaigns, campaigns of genocide, the mass dispossession of millions, the refusal of the right of return, apartheid structures that manage the existent Palestinian population in the territory that so-called Israel is occupying, and more. So when you say, yes, Israel has a right to exist, what you're really saying is that the Israelis have the right to commit these horrific acts of violence to continue maintaining what is an apartheid settler colonial endeavor. But furthermore, what's so interesting about that question is that Israelis are really the only ones who assert this inherent right for a state, or in their case, a colony, to exist at all. Like, think of that question in other contexts of former colonies and states, right? Do you think that Rhodesia, for example, had an inherent right to exist? That Democratic Kampuchea, like the government in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, had an inherent right to exist? That the Soviet Union or Yugoslavia had an inherent right to exist? That Czechoslovakia had an inherent right to exist, right? And that these states need to be reconstituted because of that inherent right, that these colonies in some instances need to be reconstituted? Of course not. It's fucking stupid, right? But Zionists will rely on this talking point because, again, they're just trying to either bait you into being smeared, or they're trying to get you to accept the legitimacy of their own territorial claims, which is what you do when you answer that question by saying, yes, I think it does have a right to exist. Like most Haspera, like most Zionist propaganda, it is a thing that is best left untouched, right? A question left unanswered because it's not being asked in good faith. You shouldn't be giving time to this propaganda. But if you're going to answer it at all, the correct answer realistically is no. It's something worth thinking about if you come across that propaganda. There are better ways of handling it than simply trying to answer the question at face value, because those asking the questions aren't doing so in good faith. But if you're gonna answer it, stick to your fucking guns. Anyway, though, as always, free Palestine, salamu alaikum, and have a great day.